But I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, hey, I'm a Beatles fan. I knew about this story. No, you didn't. And before we start, thanks to my patrons of tone, Richard P. and Co. keeping these speakers flapping. And we have a new one, Willie Steele, he's master and engineer. Thank you very much, very generous. And if you'd like to support this channel, link is in the description. Hey all, welcome to Circle of Town. And today we have story time involving the great, late George Harrison and the soon-to-be late, it's kind of messed up, but I'm British. We have gallows humor, all right? Phil Collins. And Phil Collins is a geezer, all right? He gets the piss taken out of him so often, you know, with South Park and him just sitting on an office chair doing gigs these days. He gets a lot of negative press. And he always has, even since the early days where he was absolutely brilliant. All right, I don't care what you say. Go watch some 70s Genesis live. You haven't seen nothing like it. What is the link between George Harrison and Phil Collins? One of the best side albums from a Beatle was All Things Must Pass. Phil Collins was a teenager when I think it was Ringo Starr's chauffeur called a manager to say, hey, we need somebody on percussion for this album. And do you know anybody? And they recommended this teenage phenom called Phil Collins. He gets the call and he is shitting bricks to go into the studio as a young session player. He was a very young session player. There was a lot of young bucks in and around London that were session players. You know, a lot of Led Zeppelin started off as session musicians when they were teenagers, right? Phil Collins goes into the studio with all these legends, with Phil Spector. Phil Spector, if you don't know who he is, I think is he alive or dead? He's in prison, something.
Over the last 2 years, hundreds have landed in the Summit County Medical Examiner's office.
My brother used to break in our house and steal the TV.
But now he's dead.
Because he shot a girl in the face. Rock and roll, bad boys, you know, bit of counterculture.
Kidding, it's like an orange on a toothpick.
You're gonna give the boy a complex.
Well, that's a huge noggin. It's a virtual planetoid. Has its own weather system.
Well, that was offside, wasn't it? He'll be crying himself to sleep tonight on his huge pillow.
When you want to talk about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, Phil Spector was pretty much a lot of the sex and drugs part, all right? He's an absolute nutball, but one of the greatest of all time. Look at your average teenager, all right, and what a mess they are. And then think of now you've got to go in and play with the greatest guitarist of a generation. No pressure. So he's in there and he's playing percussion. And he played until his hands were bleeding. Spector is one of those people that is, again, cracking the whip, again, has to be perfect, all right? And in the end, when they kind of joke to him and say, okay, we'll record you this time, as if they haven't been recording him for the whole session, you know, and they called him Bongo Boy or something, you know, so he was like under pressure. And in the end, he cut the tracks. He's super excited, went home, waited a few months, and the album came out, and he wasn't on it. No Bongo Boy, no bongos, none of his percussion that he played were on the album. So he was devastated. You know, he's expecting to see his name underneath George Harrison as one of the musicians, you know what I mean? So life goes on. And it was decades later where he bumps into George Harrison backstage somewhere. And he says, George, what happened to my bongo tracks, to my percussion on the album? Because nobody told me anything. Nobody told me anything, and I presumed that I'd be on it. So what happened with that? And George Harrison said, I'll be honest, I can't remember the sessions, but I do have the original tapes. So what I'll do is I'll do a mix for you of your percussion, of your bongos, and I'll send it to you. And Phil Collins was like, how made up would you be, right? Thinking that George Harrison's going to go out of his way to go into his archives, grab a tape off the thing, put it on, just as a favor. What a nice guy, right? To send to Phil Collins. And he did. Phil Collins gets a tape in the mail, puts it on, he's listening, you know, all of his dreams are on this tape. And then he realizes why he didn't make the cut, because these bongos were they were terrible. You could tell, like, because his hands were bleeding and he must have been cramping up or something, because they were just off. And in fact, after the recording, you can hear George Harrison saying, "Can we try that again without the bongos?" So ripping on his playing at the end of the tape. So he was like, "Oh my God." So he instantly called him. He calls up George Harrison and he says, "Look, man, I am so sorry. I don't know how my drums are so bad, but it's I can see why you cut me," basically. And they kept on talking for like an hour. And then George Harrison starts getting the giggles. And he keeps on bursting into laughter at Phil. And Phil's like, what's so funny, you know? And George tells him, he says, "Look, man, Phil, I got to come clean. I don't have the originals. I just got a friend to do some fake terrible playing for bongos just to wind you up." So how elaborate, decades, but a practical joke spanning decades, and with a young man just having these thoughts and dreams of the white whale that got away. Only if at the end of where you see there might be an end of this rainbow, and then George Harrison is like twirling his mustache or his beard. I think that is just, well, it's just sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It's part of it. It's part of the crack. Because the British do have a twisted sense of humor. And it's got me in trouble in America, where Americans don't see sarcasm or gallows humor and stuff like that quite as they've got, Americans have better humor in other areas, because the British can lean too heavily into that sometimes. But I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, hey, I'm a Beatles fan. I knew about this story. No, you didn't. Because the person who actually played percussion on that album was my dad. My dad was Bongo Boy. Well, he did most of the percussion on the album, along with the drummer for Yes. So the drummer for Yes did most of the drums. My dad did a lot of the percussion. And Phil Spector used to call him Tambourine Man, because he was so good at the tambourine. So maybe he did. My dad would never tell me the good stuff. He was always too humble. Like sometimes he'd get drunk and we'd talk and I'd just tell him about how much I loved Keith Moon. And he said, "Oh yeah, Keith Moon fucked my drum kit up." I was like, "What? What?" Because he had a left-handed kit, my dad. And so Keith Moon wanted to try it. And on soundcheck. And he just basically played like Keith Moon and fucking fucked all the skins up and everything and bent shit. And I'm like, I've been wearing Who t-shirts and shit since I was 12, and you're not going to tell me some Who stories? So yeah, that is the twist at the end of all this, is my dad played the percussions. Like Phil Collins, like absolute legend status. And then my dad was like picked over him. It's like, what the heck? Got to be proud of the old man. He did pass away a long time ago now, when he was 56 when he died, which is young. So his father died at 56 too, and I'm 53. So my death clock, I got another 3 years left in me. So let's go, I guess. So how cool is that? Story time. And if you are new to the channel, I recreate famous album tones. Like I've done the Kinks, I've done AC/DC, I've done the Beatles. I do oddball stuff as well, like Voivod and underground thrash, So yeah, if you like that, if you want me to tell most of these type of stories rather than do my gear videos, let me know in the chat. All right, boys, I'll see you in the comments. I'll say boys because it's 99. It's a sausage fest in here. If you are a girl in the comments, maybe a trans, have a good one. Circle of tongue. No matter what you are. Fucking hell. fucking articulation. Don't hate, articulate.